Hello everyone, Revan619 here. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Just a quick update before we carry on with the video. The DLC spreadsheet is almost complete. There is just a few little bits that I'm touching up, which is mostly the items, but all of the primary builds that I wanted to get out for the 1.6 release will be ready probably within next week at the earliest, and definitely before the update on the 25th, where Alcat are going to release the updates for Eogun's colony rewards and fix the ending slides issue. On that note, we will be talking about Pascal. Of all of my builds with the changes of 1.6, this is probably the one where this video is going to be most important about discussing things around it rather than just blindly following the spreadsheet. So let's go on and talk a little bit about what's going on under the hood with Pascal and how this man has had the biggest glow up in the history of this game, from someone who is probably in the bottom 2 to probably being one of the top damage dealers in your party. Now that Pascal receives exploits and extra turns, he can really ramp up his damage, and more importantly, overcharge protocols. This is unique to Pascal's Tech Priest origin, which is every time he uses a plasma mortar weapon, his damage with these weapons increases by 14%, which is tied to his intelligence bonus, and this stacks. This will proc on every shot, every kill, and every reload, so anything that kills enemies, anything that reloads will also proc it. His area attacks will also massively stack that. Now when you take that big area attack shot from a plasma gun that kills 5 people, that will apply 5 stacks of that plus the shot plus the reload, so that's an extra 70% damage, and you'll also be receiving potentially 5 stacks of Tide of Excellence, which will then increase more attacks. So Pascal rapidly builds up and he does a lot. One of the biggest issues I have is just trying to fit in all the talents. Being able to apply exploits on his Exposing Communion is also something that is exceptionally powerful, but also just being able to proc them anyway is also really good. So there are some things that are open to change, but the build that I've currently gone through is how I like to optimize him for unfair. But before we start going through his base build, we're probably going to need to talk about his augmentics, because there is a lot of stuff to be aware on the augments for Pascal and how some of them are actually pretty deadly to your own party. I think Pascal has started really enacting his endgame slides mid-game now with some of the augments. So the ballistic calculator here, it seems exceptionally good. This augment replaces overpenetration with ricochet. This will cause your shots that would overpenetrate to bounce around and hit multiple targets. However, the biggest issue with that is this can actually cause shots to do a 180 and come back and kill Pascal or allies around him. Whilst this was exceptionally powerful at wiping out enemy on the map, once enemies were too close, I found Pascal was wiping out himself and their own party. So if you do use the ballistic calculator, do be very aware of that. And obviously, if you use the hologram ones, be very careful if you use Expert Finesse, because Expert Finesse will actually cause him to shoot his own holograms at the end of his turn. And even worse than that is if you have Galvanic Strikes from Eogun, so the Electrified Strikes, sorry, that is, Pascal will actually kill himself when he shoots them. One of the other hidden drawbacks is now with the Ferrum Sanctum stacks, Pascal is exceptionally vulnerable to shock damage, so when he also takes energy damage, there can be a lot of issues on drawbacks of that, so you have to be very careful that he can be a lot more squishy and he can just blow himself up a lot more easily if you're trying to take those extra range shots. He does seem to be taking a little bit too much energy damage from his own explosions on safety training. I don't know if that's a bug or working as intended, but I have reported that to the devs. But the other things to bear note is Analytic System is finally now applying to Pascal, which is his Forge World bonus, but this does now count as a augment, so be careful of that. Then we also have his Machine Spirit Communion has actually been moved to be an augment, but now he gets bonuses to tech use, so that's pretty interesting. And Pascal now has the Accumulator node, which is Pascal gains the Machine Spirit Management ability, but he suffers 25% more energy damage. So yeah, Pascal is very susceptible to arc rifles. You have to be very careful with that. I actually have a unique Act 3 node. On my save, this wasn't actually working, but hopefully this is now applicable to the live version. But this replaces some of Pascal's base ability. So what happens is, in Act 3, when you take Pascal, he can get given some Heretic by the Drukhari. What this one does is the Neural Agony Probe. It allows him to use his normal Mechaniterites, but at the start of Pascal's turn, 4 cells with an 8 cell radius around him, and that's going to be based on your int bonus. If you get to 100, you obviously get 5 of those. basically when you stand inside there, you get some interesting effects. You gain +11 to all characteristics and you deal more damage. Its critical hit chance is also increased against creatures with less than 4 wounds, and the first attack Pascal makes while standing in one of these highlighted cells does not count towards the attack limit. However, before his turn and before they're up, he actually takes negatives, so he will actually lose +11 to all characteristics and his critical hit chance will be lowered. So you just got to make sure that you move into the right place and do it. Some of the other interesting augments that I found that I've been liking to use on Pascal is obviously the adaptive servo struts, because when enemies hit cover instead of Pascal, they get 3 exploits, so it's also quite good to stack that up. And you also get some cover whilst not in cover, and with the half cover bonus with the servo skull to count as full cover, this does apply. The other one is, whilst Pascal can still not be built for melee, he can have a fairly okay melee support by just changing some of his mental stats to physical stats. Unfortunately, he just doesn't have the vitality, abilities, or mobility to work in melee, but is something nice that you can use on him. You do want to be careful with using something like the Galvanic Carapace, because whilst this does give you, when you do use melee, some AoE stuff, if you wanted to try that, you're more likely to kill your own party. I have enjoyed stuff like the Regeneration Matrix. The user cannot suffer traumas. The extra damage suffered because of Ferrum Sanctum is reduced to 10% per stack instead of 15%, which is very similar to the talent. I don't believe they stack. You can try some other things on him, like the neural systems, depending on which one you're going for, but this is the one that I found to be most useful. And even just putting on some little things like the Chemist combat infusers are useful for just doing a little bit of AoE damage, but what you do pick, you can just sort of play around with. I have found that having the focal emitter instead of the ricochet has actually been more beneficial, because it allows Pascal to take more attacks and he doesn't kill the party when he shoots at targets within 3 cells of him. So let's talk about what's going on with our tech boy and how it works. If you watched my operative guide, I did talk about how most of the operative stuff doesn't scale. To my surprise, the developers now put scaling on it, so I actually get to eat some very nice humble pie here, and I'm very happy to eat this because it now means operatives are playable. Yes, a rogue trader operative still suffers from attack economy issues, but it is exceptionally better than it was before, and Pascal does not suffer economy issues ever since the 1.5 update. So analyze enemies will allow him to put on a stack of exploits whenever he gets a turn, or apply them manually himself, and with the right upgrades you will stack this quite quickly. And what that does is it gives you extra perception bonus, more damage when you attack. His exposed weakness can be used to strip armor based on your perception, so you are going to want a good mixture of intelligence and perception. Intelligence to build up the resource, perception to actually use the resource. Dismantling attack can be actually really useful with Pascal, because you also get a 3 attack that can't miss, and you can cripple the enemy's stats. The rank 4 passive learning, this is only really useful if you're really forward facing, so enemies within a 10 cell radius around the operative, at the start of the operative's turn will get extra exploits as if they had analyzed enemies, so it's not too bad. It will randomly distribute them, but it is a way to do a little bit of extra damage going into that first turn. Now, it's always important to start increasing ballistic skill. Pascal starts with an arc rifle. People that are used to sniper rifles might think arc rifles have really bad hit chance, but it's just because sniper rifles come with additional hit chance, and normally the las versions come with dodge reduction. So not having that, you notice not having that 60 ballistic skill quite early on. Aiming protocols is going to be very useful for getting that up, and the ballistic skill bonus here will actually apply to all weapons, not just plasmas, but the dodge reduction is exclusive to plasmas. Uncanny Sight is going to be very important, so you get exploits on everything when you take turns, including extra turns such as move, bring it down, finest hour, or even bounty hunter extra turns. I start building intelligence so we can hit the next breakpoint for that. Like I said, you're going to want to increase ballistic skill, intelligence, and perception. Tactical knowledge is now really useful because of how many exploits you build up, so you can actually get the extra int bonus damage very quickly when you take the upgrade, but you remove exploits to build up armor and to increase damage. I focus on tech use because some of it applies into Pascal's abilities and his talents, so it is quite useful to have on there. The other thing I should talk about when we come back around to it is his Mechandrite abilities did change. Improved tactics will give us even more damage scaling with our intelligence, which is very nice to have. External power block, we start building for the plasmas to get additional attacks early, even though we're not really going to use plasma rifles until Act 2. Dismantling attack, I take the upgrade that lowers enemies' dodge and armor around the primary target. I get 1 point into Medicae, so I can use Medicae kits, and therefore use augments that increase the range at which we can even use Medicae on allies. Because I plan to run EU Gun with Pascal, I take Law Xenos, so that way EU Gun can focus on logic and persuasion. I take some more perception for Pascal, because obviously we need to start getting up. We've already hit the breakpoint for intelligence, so it's good to push a little bit of perception. Tide of Excellence, now incredibly important. I normally take this first for my operative builds, but Pascal obviously has passive learning. More Law Xenos, perfect spot. It's going to be very useful because we get extra perception and ballistic skills, so it will allow Pascal to actually land things. Also very important for your arc rifle builds if you were going that route. Plasma Bank, yep, reloading now is free for Pascal. It's going to be 1 AP for anyone that isn't Pascal, but it means that we can abuse the reloads of the plasma guns quite easily. Next, ballistic calculations. This is always going to be up. It is a bit of a tie-up between ballistic calculations and fresh target, but I found ballistic calculations gets more use and we take fresh target later. It would be nice to have both, but obviously that passive learning stops that. So get more perception, and then because we have a leftover point, it goes into intelligence because we do want to build up intelligence. As you notice, the augment I'm using is lowering my intelligence from that 105, but it's absolutely a-okay because there are items that you can get at the end of Pascal's quest to build up more intelligence. But the most important one to finish up is going to be overcharge protocols. This is so our build will be online immediately in Act 2. Final upgrade that we're going to take here is dismantling attack, and before we go on to talk about bounty hunter, I will cover some of Pascal's unique abilities for being a tech priest. One of Pascal's 2 unique abilities is Machine Spirit Communion. This ability affects both allies and enemies. Allies, recoil is reduced for 1 round, allies dodge is increased by 29% for 1 round, which is going to scale based on your intelligence and your ferrum stacks. Enemies dodge is reduced for 1 round, enemies must pass an intelligence test or suffer +1 stack of convulsion, which increases their damage they receive from shocks. This is very good for an arc rifle Pascal or arc rifle allies. If the target has rejected the flesh or ferrum sanctum feature, or the target has a mechanism or a machine, that check with a -96 penalty, so it's pretty much guaranteed there. So this is a very good AoE buff, and it can work in with some of his abilities. There are some of them that would be good if you took earlier, but I just don't have enough talents to fit it on. The second one is Machine Spirit Management has now been buffed. The target's damage is reduced by 20% for 1 round, which is a 0.2 modifier, which is int plus the number of Tech Priest Ferrum Sanctum stacks. The target must pass an intelligence resistance test or become stunned. This is absolutely huge because this can proc some of our bounty hunter talents to give us extra attack economy. If the target has reject the flesh or Ferrum Sanctum feature, or the target is a mechanism or a machine, it suffers additional shock damage, and this doesn't count as an attack, so you can abuse this during bounty hunter turns to just start throwing out stuns as well as damage, with a 64% arm penetration, and makes a test with a -64 penalty. So you're pretty much guaranteed to stun machines, which makes Pascal an exceptional debuffer. Finally, Operative is filling its role of exceptionally high single target damage as well as debuffing potential. Now, Tier 2 is when we get our resource, which is Hunt Down the Prey. This is where a lot of fun things happen, and most people genuinely get scared off from this archetype because it just seems a little bit complicated, but it isn't really. The Bounty Hunter marks any enemy in combat as prey. Whenever the Bounty Hunter kills the target marked as prey, they gain a stackable bonus until the end of combat. The bonus depends on the enemy's difficulty tier, the Roman numerical on the enemy's icon. So 1 to 2, you get 25% of Bounty Hunter's maximum wounds as temporary wounds. 3 to 4, 5 times the prey's difficulty tier critical damage, and 2 times the prey's difficulty tier percentage critical hit chance until the end of combat. And if 5 and above, you get both of them. You start with 3 charges, and you can build them up either through abilities or your heroic. The first one we take is Claim the Bounty. This is going to increase our attack economy, so it's one of the ones it's quite important to get early on. The Bounty Hunter makes a free attack with the selected weapon. The attack always hits. This is sometimes bug, it doesn't always hit. We thought this was exclusive to arc rifles, but I have noticed some of the plasma shots miss, but it's few and far between. Does not end the Bounty Hunter's movement, but only deals 68% of the Bounty Hunter's usual damage. After each third enemy killed by Claim the Bounty Hunter receives +1 charge of Hunt Down the Prey. More importantly, if Claim the Bounty kills a target marked as prey, the Bounty Hunter recovers 2 AP. Very good on Bring It Down turns. Also, that damage is going to be based on 4 times ballistic skill bonus plus perception bonus. So if you've actually had buffs, this can actually be stronger than your base damage target attacks. First one I take is Hunting Surge. Whenever the enemy is killed by a critical hit scored by the Bounty Hunter or their ally, the Bounty Hunter gains 2 times the enemy's difficulty tier damage for 2 rounds. This is very good to start stacking up damage. Wild Hunt is going to be your heroic action. So the Bounty Hunter simultaneously makes several attacks. The number of attacks is equal to the number of prey in combat. These attacks are equally divided among all the prey in the Bounty Hunter's line of sight. The attacks always hit and always score critical hits. Rank 5, we start getting some AP, we take Ballistic Skill and we take Safety Training. The character only suffers 25% of the damage dealt by Plasma Explosion. The damage bonus from each stack of Plasma Cell Overheat is increased by 5%. So Plasma Cells, which is from your Plasma Guns, when you do a overcharged attack, using Overcharge attack with a Plasma Weapon gains 25 times the number of Plasma Cell Overheating stacks, percentage chance cannot be more than 100 of causing a Plasma Explosion. So at 4 you will just explode. Each stack of this effect increases the damage of Plasma Overcharge area attacks by 5% and Plasma Overcharge extra damage by 15% and Plasma Explosion by 10%. Start of the wielder's non-extra turn, 1 stack is removed from this effect. There are builds that use that offensively, but that's for a different video. Rank 6, we increase more Bliss Skill because more hit chance, more crit chance. Then we get Hunter's Ambush. So whenever the Bounty Hunter performs a single shot attack on an immobilized or stunned target, this attack refunds its cost and does not count for the attack limit once per round. So this is really good after using Pascal's stun and then overcharge shotting something, or even if you're using something like the self-calibrating goggles or helm, very useful to start building that up. The next one is going to be Cole the Bold. This one is very, very powerful and very, very useful. The Bounty Hunter's next attack this turn will have additional effects. It will deal +7 base damage, which is going to be tied to your Ballistic Skill bonus. The target's armor will be reduced by 3 times the difficulty tier against all of the Bounty Hunter's attacks until the end of combat. If the target's armor against this attack is below 20%, their target's dodge bonus is also reduced by 3 times target's difficulty tier percentage against all the Bounty Hunter's attacks until the end of combat. Additional damage of the Bounty Hunter's attack is also increased to a +17. Prey. If the target is marked as prey, its armor and dodge are also reduced against the attacks of the Bounty Hunter's allies. This will tend to stack. So you'll tend to get both of them and you will see 2 damage procs in the notes. I don't know if it's meant to add 2 sets of damage, but it will make this attack exceptionally powerful. It's when Yurilit will do her most damage and it's when Pascal will also do his most damage. Rank 8, Heightened Concentration. So whenever the Bounty Hunter scores a critical hit, they gain 9% arm penetration to the end of combat. And that is also going to be based upon your perception. And I continue increasing his tech use and continue increasing his intelligence. We take the Scanner Mechanic, right? Common talent. This will increase his perception by 10. So that will reduce enemies' dodge, as well as half of that bonus will go to your initiative. Savor the Kill. When prey that is not being trailed is killed by an ally, the Bounty Hunter gains an extra turn with half their MP and AP. The Bounty Hunter cannot attack during this extra turn. However, Pascal can stun things, throw out buffs, throw out exploits, and even strip enemies of armor. So he's very good at debuffing on those turns. More tech use, more perception. We take Wild Hunt Upgrade 2, so the Bounty Hunter gains 3 MP and restores 3 charges of Hunt down the prey. More prey means more bonuses. Expert Finesse. This one is one to be wary of. Whenever the Bounty Hunter kills an enemy whose difficulty tier is 4 or higher, the Bounty Hunter immediately reloads, which increases our plasma damage, and the attacks the closest enemy in their line of sight. This attack has 50% over penetration, but only deals 41% of the Bounty Hunter's usual damage. This will shoot through allies and sometimes kill them, and if you have the Ricochet module on, this would wipe out your own team, because it's always the closest target. Be very wary of that one. We continue taking Lorzino's Perception. I finally pick up Filtering Protocols, so whenever Pascal uses a Plasma Melter weapon in the first turn round, he gains 1 AP. Very useful on those extra turns. Hot on the Trail is what I take here, which you could also take in Snare the Prey, but the Bounty Hunter designates an enemy in a 10-cell radius trailed and finishes his turn. If an ally kills a trailed enemy, the Bounty Hunter gains an extra turn after that ally's turn with all AP and MP remaining from the moment they used Hot on the Trail. The Bounty Hunter gains an additional 2 plus the difficulty tier MP. The cooldown for Hot on the Trail is reset. When Hot on the Trail is used for a 3rd time in combat, the Bounty Hunter receives +1 charge of Hunt down the prey. So this can be very useful if you run out of attack economy but still have AP, so you can set it to an enemy to have an ally kill it so you can take more turns, more exploits, more damage, more win. Go, 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 Pascal. We then take Inspiring Trophy. Whenever the Bounty Hunter kills a prey whose difficulty tier is 4 or higher, the Bounty Hunter also gets 2 AP, so you'll get that with that Expert Finesse. More Intelligence for our operative stuff, more Lorzinos. Trail and Shatter means Hot on the Trail now has a limited range and reduces enemies' target by 27% for 2 rounds, so you don't even need line of sight really for enemies for this. That makes it more useful. I take Pinnacle of Weaponry, so the first attack in combat of any plasma melt or a power weapon deals an additional 9 damage. Very good if that first shot is overcharged on a stun enemy, as I said, because you'll refund that cost. The remainder of combat, that bonus is decreased to a 4. Now, whilst I take that here, alternatively, you could be looking at other talents here, so it's going to be up to you. If you wanted to go for something like Exposed Communion, so your communions get extra stacks when you're using your abilities there are other things that you might want to be able to take on that from Pascal's Tech Priest origin. Anything around the communion, like being able to apply exploits from his communion, could also be very useful, or if you maybe wanted to start picking up any of the new augmentation talents. But this is what I take for tier 2, and we'll talk about a little bit of his items before we go on to look at tier 3. So for me, when it comes to Pascal, I put on whatever gives him the most armor so he can try to survive, and in Act 4 I give him the Perception armor, which is the Highvold Origin Voicement armor. You can get 7 of these from Footfall in Act 4. The only in item in the game requires a colony decision from Solomon, and this it gives him plus 15 intelligence. I do like to take the long range aim lens, which you pick up in Act 3, which gives you additional range. And one of the other items I like is the Prey Scanner. I believe this is Act 2, it might be Act 3, but at the start of combat you inflict prey effects on an enemy of the highest number of wounds without spending a charge of Hunt Down the Prey, and grants double the bonus of Hunt Down the Prey for killing it. You can either use the Plasma Shaper gloves or the Apex Predator gloves, which allows you to double stack uses of prey, but at the moment I'm using Apex Predator gloves on Urilet. For the boots, I'm using Sororitas boots because Pascal gets so many kills, I proc that very easily. You could also use the Sharpshooter boots if you wanted to get extra armor penetration damage. There aren't that actually many range cloaks, so I've actually just given him the Von Valancius cloak for plus 5, but if you want to give him like the Bleed cloak or the Grenadier cloak, that is very possible. His helm is the self-calibrating helmet. Like I said, the goggles and the helmet's very good for building up stun. And you can also use the Tether helmet, which he gets from his unique quest line, but it doesn't come till very late game. For weapons, I normally just give him his best Omnissiah axe because he doesn't really go into melee for me. But the biggest gun that you can get, and the upgrade to the Ancient Plasma Rifle, is the Ragefire Plasma Gun, because the additional damages of that 30% fire damage will stack with all your additional modifiers. Before they nerfed the Great Defense, this would actually do more damage than your base shot, but it's still very, very good. And Pascal, if you're wondering where you get any of these items, do look at the wiki that I always link, because it will show you where they all drop. I did used to keep this in my spreadsheet, and anything from DLC 2 or before will be already linked in the spreadsheet below. And as soon as the 1.6 spreadsheet is updated, I will put a link with that and with the wiki into the description of all of these videos. Before going on to the Exemplar levels, let's talk about what your turn's going to look like. Because I can't show you, because I'm trying to avoid spoilers, and unless you come to a live stream, I can't show you right now. But in future videos where I'm doing updates and other variants, I will show you combat encounters. But what your turn is mostly going to look like is you're going to use Machine Spirit Banishment to stun an enemy, and then you'll take an overcharge shot, normally the regular overcharge, to be able to refund your attack, which will basically allow you to do a really powerful shot, reload, build extra stacks of plasma, and then keep going. Or if there is a group of enemies that you could easily kill, you can just slap on Cold the Bold and go straight for an area attack and take out the area of enemies to be able to get back some more damage. But if you notice there is a prey that you could kill very easily, you would mark them as prey first, stack your damage with Cold the Bold, probably analyze them to get up more damage, and then you would use your offhand attack after having perfect spot to get up your ballistic skill and your perception, which will boost the damage of this, to then be able to refund 2 AP, which then would leave you open to be able to do an overcharge shot, or even a Machine Spirit Banishment before an overcharge shot to be able to refund the AP, or do other attacks. Because Pascal has 2 attacks by default on the start of the turn, you'd be able to make 2 normal attacks, you'd be able to do a overcharge shot that could be refunded, so then you'll potentially have an extra attack on top of that, so that's 4 attacks already. Claim the Bounty as a 5th attack. If any of these are high value targets, you will attack again, so you'll be able to then make 6 attacks. Once you then have Death Dealer, that will be 7 attacks, and you'll be reloading between all of them, and the amount of attacks Pascal will be going off will be just absolutely crazy. He really does become an anti-air gun, but with plasma, so you would just be firing like crazy. And like I said, this is why we don't pick Ricochet anymore, because when I was testing, all I was doing was killing my own party. Different from the 1.5 version, I now start with degraded defense because since it's been nerfed, I don't feel bad about taking it early. Fresh target will help Pascal take out those first shots to be able to refund AP when marking targets as prey. Share the spoils would mean if allies kill things, you'll also get half the bonuses you would have done. We start building up ballistic skill, but the first common talent we're going to take is lethal precision. Each turn, the first single attack the target makes scores a critical hit and deals 50% more critical damage if the user has an augment in their optical insertion. And like I said, you stun an enemy, you use a single target overcharge shot, you get another 50% damage here, and you will also refund all of that. Very useful. Joint analysis be very good for your bounty hunter turns because you'll add your intelligence bonus to your allies' base damage. We get some tech use up. Death Dealer is going to be another really good Exemplar talent because more attack economy here, so it's just about getting those extra shots off and those extra reloads. Flay the Bold is an upgrade that we take here to further strip enemies' defenses. It will lower their willpower and their toughness, which makes them easier to kill, and it also makes them less resistant to your allies' psycho powers. We take Bliss skill and finally get continuous analysis. Now that it has scaling, this is going to be very useful for getting out even more exploits. Piercing shot, like I said, if you'd use this with ricochet, this does increase the amount of ricochet, but just getting over pen is fine because it's much easier to plan for that than watching the random bouncers wipe out your team. More intelligence, Pierce and Ruin is the upgrade here, so piercing shot will reduce enemies' armor. I then get calculated resolve, so until the end of Pascal's turn, he gets 2 resolve for each critical hit scored, and yeah, it's just free resolve, so chances are you're going to definitely be getting that heroic action, especially with Sororitas boots. Lord Xenos, get extermination early because we're making so many attacks that we're going to be building up a lot of stack of extra damage, especially with Tide of Excellence on top of that. Get comprehensive analysis because then we'll build even more, so we're seeing +8 additional exploits than the normal of what we would apply based on our intelligence. Sniper expertise will allow perfect spot to do extra arm penetration, but at this point you're always going to be over arm penetrating. Unfortunately, excess armor pen doesn't do anything. Pierce the Armor is another one that's going to come in where we can get even more reductions to our enemy's armor. We get some more intelligence, some more perception, some more logic. Rank 15 we get Eager for Battle, so those 2 extra action points in the turn 1 and during Fire and Sour are quite useful. Not as important as they used to be, but it is still nice to have. Weak Body, Weak Soul means your exposed weakness will actually lower enemies' toughness and willpower, which will therefore lower their actual health. Exposing Communion is one that I get in here. So targets get 2+ the convulsion stacks more exploits whenever we're using effects. That makes Exposing Communion up your damage, which is quite nice to have. More logic. I take Sharpshooter kind of late because I do move, and this only works if you don't move, but you get more damage on single shots and extra ballistic skill for those single shots, but it doesn't stack. Residual Power, which is when we galvanize an augment, we will get 55% extra base damage to our guns, so very, very powerful in Pascal. More precise attack, so we can build up some more perception when we use it. This one's not exactly the biggest one, which is why I kind of take it late, but just having a way to passively build perception when you use it and guaranteeing that you land a hit is quite useful, even though a lot of our abilities guarantee hits, so we don't need to worry about that too much. Get some more perception, because obviously once we get that up, that's very nice. I don't even take the talent to ignore enemies' deflection, because you don't really need it that much, because even by the shard, your damage is so high, it doesn't matter how much deflection he has. Deadly Aim will also give us extra damage based on our dodge reduction, and our dodge reduction is going to be very high, and we finish up with Insightful Precision. That's going to be the build that does it. Yeah, with all these items, I've got his item progression on the sheet, but yeah, Pascal is doing a lot now. He is probably one of my favorite damage dealers in this update, and I'm very happy to always have him in the party. If you found this video useful, do give me a like, do comment below on what you're looking forward to, and if you do keep in touch on the Discord, I can let you know as soon as the spreadsheet's ready, and if there are any builds that you want to see added to the spreadsheet, that will be the place to do it. There are other weapons that you can use here, but I was trying to avoid spoilers, but you can guess what they're going to be based on the DLC. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all again, and thank you for stopping by.